for coming. It's great to have you here. I'm so pleased that Matt said yes to coming and talking about his work. I thought he would be perfect because I know he's very hands-on and you can really see how he does what he does, how he creates his magic. We're very fortunate that we have some of Matt's paintings here in the hospital in our permanent collection. If you've ever had the pleasure of going for an endoscopy.
Or colonoscopy?
Yeah,
colonoscopy.
well, yeah, and that's the endoscopy.
Oh, endoscopy,
suite.
okay.
But yes, you'll have seen Matt's work in the waiting room to soothe you before you head on in. And this is part of our First Friday's Artist Talk series here at DH Arts, which is a program that we do together with the Aging Resource Center. So thank you again for coming. We will not be having a January Artist Talk due to being so close to the holidays that first Friday, but we'll be running back up in February. And just as a little quick note, we'll do 2 housekeeping notes. The bathrooms are, if you make a right outside this door immediately and go straight back, before you go out into that main wall, you go straight back, sort of behind this wall are the bathrooms. And at 11, you have double the fun today. We have the Artist Talk, but at 11:10, we have the Hanover High School Chorus singing in the rotunda, all 80 of them. So that's who's coming. So you'll have two for the price of one today.
Yeah, nice.
So without further ado, I will welcome Matt again, and thank you, Matt, for
thank
coming.
you, Mary Ann.
Oh, Matt also has a new gallery space.
Through the years of working on these prints, and this was 1993, so I've been doing this 26 years. I have come to the idea there's something inherent to the process encouraging an exciting path which straddles the tension between flat 2D surface and illusion picture space. I think really it's what I just mentioned. It's that it's just flat shapes and colors. So it's a much more restricted form for making imagery than many other things like watercolor or drawing or painting or oil painting or something. The process in working with the wood and water encourage and here, this is an interesting sentence. I saw this morning. I thought, oh boy, what was I thinking? Which encourages a tightrope to become a balance beam, to become a wide plank, to become a broad, wide bridge. Think of 2D, 3D conversation, 2D to 3D back again. Well, I'm not entirely sure what I had in my mind when I wrote this. But the 2D to 3D is the idea that you take a two-dimensional image, and then when you carve it, here we'll pass this there. When you carve a block to use it for printing, it becomes a three-dimensional object, and then when you print, it goes back again to 2 dimensions. And that's kind of interesting. Not only that, it reverses, and it's different parts being brought together. And those woodblock prints that Carolyn brought in, actually, interestingly enough, were made by a team. Hiroshige didn't carve his blocks there, nor did he print them. He did a brush drawing that led the start of the project. That drawing would have been carved. Prints from that would get pasted to subsequent block for the color blocks. They would get carved, and then all that set of blocks would head off to the print shop where printers would print the prints. So it was quite an art industry, and this folder here it has in it examples. I am way onto the idea of these prints by a particular designer, Kunisada. And Kunisada and Hiroshige were actually friends. They were artists in the same school, the Utagawa school, and they worked collaboratively. In this folder, I've got a pair of prints that were made by Kunisada and Hiroshige, the guy who designed these prints here. Let's see if I can find those. And so I like the idea of this as a collaborative art form. And I think of when I'm making my art that in a way I'm collaborating too. I'm getting the different blocks to collaborate with each other. And so it's this business of putting parts together, breaking the thing into pieces and putting it back together.
So you said he paints a picture then somebody else does the carving.
Yeah, and the way that they worked it, and there's a look to these prints, both the Kunisada and the Hiroshige prints. I'll bring one over. And it's, actually you can see it really well in this framed print, which maybe is not, oh no, I think this is a Hiroshige image. But this is like not a landscape, but a beauty. There are these sort of themes that they worked on. It was a very large art industry in Japan. And, you know, why it got worked out as their printing method, and it really was there wasn't, you know, they didn't have offset press and they didn't have the internet and so forth. So this is an example of a society that was an interesting detail. In 1800, most of these prints were made in Edo, which current day Tokyo, and in 1800 that city was by quite a bit the largest city in the world. And in that city, about 20% of the people didn't work. They didn't do any work. They were upper class Japanese, required to live in that city for a period of time every year. That was part of the, so the sort of the political and economic story behind it all is that in the 16th century, Japan was in civil war and trouble for about 100 years. This was a time when there were Western missionaries there and all kinds of stuff coming and going. They had guns. There's a guy who lived in Thetford, Noel Perrin. Did anybody know that writer, Noel Perrin? He wrote a book called Giving Up the Gun about this story of how in about 1630, this one upper-class daimyo family got control of most of the country, the Tokugawa family. And they put the emperor in house arrest, and it's sort of a military dictatorship that they set up. And they established a lot of limits in that society. Nobody left the country. You know, they isolated this country. And for 200 years, they banished guns. It was probably, they may have been ahead of the West in their gun technology, and they banned them. That's what Noel Perrin's book is about. And there are a number of things that got established. And in a way, that society took on a lot of form. And they required these upper class to come to Edo for this period, where they had nothing. So arts and entertainment and all really flourish in this city, and especially theater. And that's what this is all about, the theater. And this becomes this art form for this society. And so this designer, Hokusai is an artist you've heard of. Hokusai, they think, made about 1,800 print designs in his career. This artist, Kunisada, they think did maybe over 30,000.
Oh my God.
He was probably one of the world's most prolific and in his lifetime successful artists ever. He was very wealthy. He had the most students. He was the big. And this is Kunisada. Yeah, and part of why I have so many of these prints is because they made so many, and then also this particular artist was more or less dished by Westerners when they came to Japan, because they saw lots and lots of his prints, way too many. And the colors were so strong and the design so bold, they said, oh, this is the decay of the art form. These are the better prints. These is more Hiroshige, Hokusai. These are better. The older ones are better. They're more subtle and sensitive. And this is bad art.
Give me a date. Give me some
So,
history.
well, these guys were about the same time, and it really gets going he dominated through the 1820s, right up till his death in 1865. Japan is open in 1853. So a lot starts happening. You see it in the prints in the 1850s, even a little bit before, because you see Western pigments coming in, a lot more interest in. They had knowledge of Western art, however, right from the start. The wood blocks, the multiple block method gets started in the end of the 1760s. So it's right around the time of the American Revolution that this art form takes off. And it had, nobody really knows the extent of it and whatnot. And interestingly, one of the nation's real, prominent scholars on it is the Professor Alan Hockley here at Dartmouth. And he's actually the first person who told me about Kunisada. He said, well, actually, Matt, the really big artist was this Kunisada. I hadn't really known about him, although I had been given a Kunisada print way back when, through another story that goes on and on. So at any rate, the point of a lot of this is these prints, when they come out of Japan, have it's a pretty fresh look. There's a lot of them, and they're not expensive in many ways. They're accessible. So you have a lot of Western artists like the Impressionists, Monet and Manet and Van Gogh. Van Gogh owned, we're pretty sure, over 100 Kunisada prints. They were pretty cheap, and he really liked them, and he had them, and so he copied Rochegay prints and Eisen and some others.
But now I know this is when my husband's ancestor, who used to be sailing all the time, that's the time when he was going.
Oh.
So he
Oh, wow.
brought these back.
Yeah.
They never got framed. They were all in a pile.
Well, that's the best in a way. Like where I come in with the Kunisada story is last fall. This would be, well, it was August of 2017. Was opening. There's a neat woman. She just knows so much. Who's the curator of Japanese art at the MFA. The MFA actually has the largest collection of Japanese prints in the world. The Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And the reason for that is there were a couple of Boston folks who got on to going to Japan in like the 1890s and just bought tons of prints and put them all into the museum's new collection. And they own actually over 10,000 prints by Kunisada. And last fall was the first time they've exhibited any of them. They have over 10,000 by this artist. I don't know how many Hiroshige's, but they go. The point of that story is just that this is art like we can't even kind of conceive of it. But it's all based on that brush line. So get back to your question. It's a brush line that makes a key line drawing, and then that drawing is carved like it's a line. So you see here how there's a line in these lovely lines, and so all of those ukiyo-e prints are sort of really, it's a comic book language. In fact, our modern day comic book idea, where there's black drawn line and then colors brought to it, you can make a good case that basically this is the ancestor of that art form or that language, the Japanese prints, which is pretty interesting, pretty neat.
It was assembly line.
Well, it was a real industry. And for instance, for Kunisada, one of the things that fascinates me as well is like those two prints we're looking at there, he wouldn't have done it. There were a number of print designs came out of that shop every day, and he would have done the basic, laid out the basic lines, and he would have had other artists work on other parts, and it was a big collaborative art. I'm just fascinated by that.
Would
that
he have
conversation.
said what colors he wanted?
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing that's really interesting about this art is why I'm particularly fascinated. So he got really dinged, and so there's like very little written on him and his prints. And the first real biography only came out in the 1990s. The fellow who wrote that is an English guy who has a gallery in New York, and I visited with him a number of times. And he explained this story to me. We were back in his office, and he has all these books on all these print designers. There's a ton of books on Hoku science. And I said, Sebastian, what's the story? There's like hardly any on Kunisada except for your own. And, why? And he goes, oh, that's not true. Well, mostly they are since I published mine, and they're mostly in Japanese, but it actually is true. But now, the Japanese print dealers that I've met up with, and especially there's one hotshot one he's the head of the Minnesota Museum of Art, Andreas Marx. He's a German guy, and he wrote his dissertation on Kunisada. So it's in my imagination of this, these artists were mountains. Utamaro, Harunabu, Hokusai, Hiroshige, but the biggest mountain of all has hardly been climbed, and that's why I'm so interested in this and trying to turn you on to this idea. So let's go back to get in a little printing here, and we can see how this actually works.
So do you draw out a picture first to get
Yeah.
your ideas?
Yeah.
Do you do it on paper or do you do it on the block?
So there's a little difference today to what Kunisada was working with, and I can't help. I'm just too tempted to segue into a little story. When I was at Harvard, it turns out same class, both lived in Lowell House, both did the 5-year program, graduated at the same time. Izzy Goldman has been a dealer in Japanese prints ever since, and he lives in London. So we're, same age and whatnot. And he sold me last March a Kunisada drawing. Now the drawings are rare, and because they get pasted to the block and carved up. I showed my drawing to Sarah, and she was pretty interested because the MFA owns all these prints, but they don't own any drawings. And the drawings give you a lot of clue to, how they did it and whatnot. And they would paste that thing down, and for some reason, we think we know the reason, and that's another story. This one wasn't carved up, wasn't made into a print. Myself, we live now in a time where we can reproduce things. So we use the Xerox machine, like in the class and whatnot, and so we tend to paste. I tend to teach and follow a really traditional way where we actually take drawings and they're reproduced and they're printed, pasted to blocks, and we carve through them. But it's a more open-ended way of making an image. So if you look at my prints over here, you don't see that line. There's little references to lines here and there, but more or less, I'm working with the idea that the edge of a shape creates a line, and it's actually one that's more resonant of the way we actually experience and see our world. And so that's what I work with. If that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Well, here's a block. This is an interesting block. It's just no carving at all. It's just a flat. So I can, with this, show you a little bit about how the printing is with
So what did you just put on? Just water?
rice paste. So the printing is with water. So it's pigment in water. Yeah, if you want to come over, and that might work out better. I don't know about the camera. All right, can the camera sort of see you? Can you see what's going on? Yeah. So the main reason for the rice paste is without it, it's hard to get good, strong, even color. The starch in the paste affects the suspension of the pigment particles, and with the rice paste you can get the good, strong, the good, even color. It's an interesting printing method because, literally what we've set up here is what it took to make those prints. I mean, no big deal in a way, right? Just blocks, brushes, pigment, and water. It's pretty simple. But that said, it's sort of, I'm fascinated by the sort of simplicity, complexity dynamic because, of course, it's really simple form. But when you're talking, especially if you're talking printing or print making, and you exponentially increase the complexity when you bring in colors. Most Western printmaking has been really black and white etchings, and, intaglio printmaking, and there just really isn't anything like what the Japanese got into as far as the development of color in their printmaking. And sometimes I think, well, maybe it's because the form that, and the structure of what they were working with was so simple that they could really just work that art form.
I can't imagine him going to do as many as he did in the time that he did.
Well, it was a team, it was a whole team effort. Because the only fellow they know that ever actually did any carving of the artists was Hokusai. As far as they know, the rest of them didn't ever even carve. They were just the artists doing the designs, and then the carving and the printing are a big part of the appreciation of the print. In the day, because they were seen as crafted objects and celebrated as crafted objects. And so there's one one Hiroshige print over there which is like really not that well crafted. It's pretty, it's kind of crude, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
They're all different. So when I print, I'm on a solider. This table isn't that solid.
I think I don't know enough about art and sculpture. Muscle work.
So here we have, we're just getting going. We have, it's harder for me because it's not solid to develop a lot of pressure. But basically, one of the things that's magic about this and interesting, I just pulled this print and look, I can touch it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not that it's dry because I've wet the papers. I wet them earlier this morning. The pigment is, I've driven the pigment into the pore of the paper. It's like we're dyeing the paper, or the pigment's gone into the
What kind of paper is it?
well, it's special to me. I'm using actually not a Japanese paper, but a French cotton paper. Reeves Heavyweight is Arches paper, and that's kind of a innovation, and it's part of the language of my particular prints, that paper. So we're just working a little fade. You can see how it's more color top and bottom. I'll probably just print 2 of them with this block and then go on and print another block. Take a paper like so. Start light at first. Just varying the...
Rubber. What is?
So this tool is called a Baron, or Baran, and it originally is a bamboo coil in a lacquered paper disc. This one is a plywood disc with a nylon coil that a family in Japan makes. And at the moment, I'm embarrassed. I can't find my really good home Baran. So anyway, that's all.
We don't know the difference.
Okay. So I'm going to move right on to, maybe we'll just go ahead and print these 2 yellow blocks.
The biggest one of them remains.
So we recently, this summer, managed to overcome some obstacles, and there are 2 prints that are about that big, and it's a recent development, and it involves a couple of the blocks printed on a press. And then there's some other things. I did the first one collaboratively with a printmaker down in, lives in Brattleboro, William Hayes. And we had seen a show at the Clark a year ago fall. Helen Frankenthaler did a number of collaborative print projects with Japanese printers using this method. And that got us going, and at some point I said, Bill, how about you and I see what we can do? Because they made a couple of huge ones, and they were real sort of almost show-off projects. And I thought,
Nothing wrong with that.
and so I thought, all right, well, we'll see what we can do. And it's pretty exciting. It's just, making these prints is a lot of work, and it's my full-time work, so I'm like, there's printing and framing and coming and giving talks at places and stuff. So it's slow to get, new breakthroughs can take years to really get out. But that's what we're on to, yeah. Okay, so here's, all right, I'm going to print this one with actually mostly water. So you can just stack these prints one on top of another, which is a nice quality.
They dry immediately?
They're not drying. They're as I mentioned, they are. It's like you're driving the pigment to the paper. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Oops. In a number of those Kunisada prints, you can see barren marks. You can see evidence of the barren rubbing, and you can see where the brushing goes on. It's just this business right here. So another thing that's fun in this printing is just watching it as it develops. So you can see how I'm printing another block, different block, but I'm using the same color. This is kind of an interesting sort of thing. Oh, the registration is achieved by the simple method of two carved, it's a right angle and a straight. They're called kento, little registration marks. And the paper physically, I'm placing the paper physically to those carved clefts. And that's what holds. It's quite accurate, the registration. Oh, here we had the things are a little dry, and the paper tore a little bit. I'm going to go right ahead and do just one more with this block, and then we'll move on. Maybe do one more and see if we got any questions. I suppose we started a little late. Maybe we'll go a little bit past 11. Might be fun to hear the choir out there, Yeah, one of the things about this art form is, like in this country, there aren't that many people doing it. There's very little taught at the college level. Not very many. There's a little bit of it. There's a fellow who's Japanese who teaches at Wesleyan University, who makes prints using this method, Keiji Shinohara. And then there's a guy who teaches like part-time at RISD, Daniel Heyman. Those are two at RISD. Oh, the Rhode Island School of Design.
Oh, that's right. I never knew to call it that.
Yeah. And but we don't know of anybody else really teaching it at college level. And so mostly, but the interest is gaining. There's the internet makes it, more able for people to get the information you need about it, and so on and so forth. So here's one. This is from a previous demo, and we were kind of getting a little nutty with the colors. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, it's quite interesting to be able to change. I see. I got to get a new bear. Oh, actually, I probably have one. I probably have another one. I do.
I can see how you could build some construction.
It's imagery that's built.
Yeah.
Yeah, block by block, color by color.
Oh, my.
Well, that's quite messed up there, but let's see what other. Oh, this is an interesting one. I'll lay in some color on that one. What do you think, Marianne? We started a little later. Should we go to a little bit past?
You can go a little bit past, as you
Yeah.
can tell, I'm in and out, directing traffic out there.
Okay,
But there's no
Yeah.
reason you all can't enjoy
Okay.
it more.
all right.
Just as I can. No, please
All right.
do.
We'll see what sorts of interests or question people get into. Of course, me, I'd just soon settle in all day on this project.
We have this room for at least another half an hour.
I wish it's going to be, I can't, not till after Christmas that I can really get back to,
So we have
very
the
much
room
printing.
until 1, I believe.
oh, I see, wow,
You are welcome to show as long as everyone would like.
okay.
Will we hear the music from here?
Most likely.
Oh, really? Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, there's a lot of singers. Yeah. I like certain music. When it comes to Christmas, it gets old fast. They started around Halloween.
I'm singing in
That's unfortunate.
we have a Christmas pageant in Lyme.
Oh,
This is our 70th year. Well, the performance will be tomorrow and Sunday, and tonight is our dress rehearsal, which is pretty much the full thing. So we had a rehearsal on Wednesday, and I haven't done it for a few years. I sing tenor, and there's another fellow who's just a wonderful tenor voice. And so it's just been actually me and him because he's just so good, and I can stay up with him. So our sound is strong enough for the tenor section. And on Wednesday night, he said, "Oh, Matt, I won't be here Friday night."
I won't be. Oh, so you're solo?
So I'm a little bit like, I got to do some more homework. I got to get it. Yeah,
You're the one that has to be.
I got to get some more homework. So that's in some ways there's so many, maybe that business about the limits and the form. I just basically what I do when I make my prints is they take a lot of time to work all this out, and I try different things. I try the colors in different ways, and I just think that's why it's rewarding, because I just am milking the shapes and the colors just by trying it in all these different ways, and so they're gaining it's just my idea about it.
Oh, I am thrilled.
And then you can walk away and think about it.
Yeah, and try it in different ways. I mean, and try different.
Sticks with you.
Well, one thing that's really neat is you make quite a paper trail. So,
Yeah.
so you've got examples of different ways of having handled things, and I mean, maybe like this one, it got a little dry, but maybe what we might do to see where it could go is print. Where's the block that's printing?
I try to see the resemblance between the block here and print.
Yeah, it's interesting because of course you're working both in reverse and
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing because inherently you're taking the thing apart and putting it back together, but also that little sentence said something about the process of working with a wooden work. A tightrope to become balanced. I guess what I was thinking with that is that it's both flash shapes and it's depicting it's a developed pictorial space, and I'm fascinated by that tension, and just like, but noticing that the more I work on an image, it just innately gains more of its own life, and off we go. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah, I mean, where it is now is see this print. It's an older print, and I printed these blocks. I think it was an edition of 150, and I sold it out years ago. And my intention is to give it a new life and start a new edition. It'll be labeled Second State, and it'll probably be an edition of 300. And so it behooves me to really think about how I want to do it. And I don't believe I've really carved any new blocks yet, and I haven't really, I've just been bringing it to demos. and just getting sort of, I don't know, it's as though it's an old piece of music and you just get it out, play it for a little bit and see what you think. What's that?
Recycling.
Yeah, we're going to recycle it.
Yeah.
It's and we're just getting to know
Reuse.
right what it might be able
Thing
to
you
be.
didn't throw it away.
Yeah.
Do you have the original drawing that you started with?
Yeah, I do. It's really simple. What is key about this particular image is, I guess I had a folder that has the, the print as it was, and I left it. Sorry. But it's the way that the space is divided up. It's this, like there's this strong horizontal right down the middle. Boom, half, and the water, and the mountain and the sky, and this dark's over here, and the way it heads out, and the sort of.
How'd you get that little movement in the middle?
That's,
That. Little, right there.
You mean through here?
Yeah, that
Well,
orange.
they're it's carved, these carved parts
It didn't occur in.
in some of them. Yeah.
well, what is interesting is this part here,
Like
which
walking
isn't, you
I
can't
know. Oh,
see
right.
that in a
It
lot
doesn't.
of others, that makes that fascinating.
What is this a place you can identify?
Yes, and the story, I mean, it goes way back. My younger son is 21 now, and I remember he was like a little 2 or 3 year old guy, and we went for a little hike or something one afternoon, and he fell asleep in the car, and the backside of Reservoir Pond, this is on the way, back part of the line, and I just looking back over the pond at the mountain, and I realized, oh, Ash is asleep in the car. And I got my drawing out, and I just was in a mood, and I just laid that in, and the drawing, boom, I just got the idea of the two trees, and it's sort of like, I think it's partly the two trees and these two horizontals and the mountain. This is where it goes back to that business of pictorial structure. I really feel that the ones that really work for me, or what I'm chasing after ultimately, is the structure of the abstract structure is what seems to make the prints really work. That's where the magic is.
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
how I feel.
Yeah.
And so, as the person, the magic maker, or the one who's trying to make some magic, you're trying to figure out how to make that magic. And that's like my fascination with this Kunisada, because I just feel like he hit that magic over and over and over again. He's just was a brilliant artist, in my opinion. So that's all right. We're gonna lay one or two of these in.
You start with the lightest color first?
When we're edition printing, yes, we tend to print light to dark. When I'm building a print, figuring out the blocks, carving the various blocks, I'll often carve those darker blocks first. So there's before, that one I kind of messed up. So it's this funny pink. I'm not really that into that pink, actually.
You didn't put any paint on that.
No, I didn't, because there's so what's really technically happening, and this business of being able to touch them is part of it, and also the look of them. I just love the look of them, which is that really you're feeding the pigment to the pore of the block, and then under that pressure, that pigment is passing to the pore of the paper. And so there's a lot of memory of pigment in the block.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to just get a little bit of another color out here. And yeah, I mean, one thing that I've noticed is if you're printing, for instance, with oil inks, and you want to tweak your color, it's a big deal. You got to clean your rollers, and you got to this and that. Here, you just get out a little water and drop a little pigment on there, and boom. So that's, I think, yeah.
irritating and a lot of just straight. I thought I did.
Yeah, it's a lot easier when that table's not moving around. Thank you very much. So the color hasn't changed significantly, but it's starting to change. We'll do a couple more. Any particular questions or things that people want me to touch in on here before we sort of think of? Marianne shared that I took over about a year ago this gallery in Lyme had been going for about 20 or 30 years, I think, Long River Studios.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering if that's where you went, if that was your address, was that one?
Yeah, I took that space over. We call it Matt Brown Fine Art now, but it's has much of the feeling of the original Long River, in that it focuses on work by this just Lyme and Thetford, really, is what we're
nice.
doing. We actually have a rule that you got to be Lyme and Thetford, so we made it kind of formal. But and take the little flyer or such. For instance, this Sunday we have a opening party, 1 to 4. Or stop up sometime. We're only on the schedule. We're only open 2 days a week, Fridays and Saturdays. But Lyme's fun to visit. And come up sometime. Yeah. And not everything. We have a lot of prints of mine, but we have. There's a woman who makes soaps and syrup. We have jewelry. We have some nice pottery. The potter that we have, we have a couple potters, but one, she's moved down to Heartland, but she lived in Thetford.
Listening to your voice.
Uh-oh. That's neat she mentioned that spot. Ooh, look at that one. I'm going to skip by that one. Go on to this one.
So you can have, what's the most number of blocks that you've had?
Well, the most I've done is, I don't know, 16 or so. But KG did one print that was supposedly 100 blocks or some crazy thing.
Whoa.
So you can just keep on going, I guess, if you want to.
You really
Yeah.
get down to the minutest detail. Wow.
So I'll do one more here.
So did you start off with a potato?
No, how the.
Remember, we used to carve potatoes
Yeah.
and use them as the
Oh,
right dance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, potato printing. Well, I might ask you guys, I've got to do all these things today, and then I've got to practice my tenor part.
You could have been singing your lesson to us.
Yeah, it's fun, It's so it's basically watercolor printing, and that's Hanga method.
Wow.
All right.
I was going to say, makes me feel uncreative, right?